Wherever there are shadows, there are people ready to kick at the darkness until it bleeds daylight. This is Bleeding Daylight with your host, Rodney Olson.
Welcome to Bleeding Daylight. Thanks for being here. A full library of episodes is waiting for you at bleedingdaylight.net. You'll also find all our social media links there. I'd love to connect with you. What kind of story do you tell yourself about who you are? For many of us, our internal voices can speak of doubt, disappointment, and discouragement. Are the negative things we tell ourselves the real story, or are we lying about the person we are and the person we were created to be? Today's guest has battled the voices formed from trauma, and today is telling himself the truth about his own story. Jim Burgoon is a speaker, author, certified leadership coach, military veteran, former pastor, teacher, husband and dad, but more than any of those titles, he's a man who's done the hard work of learning how to tell the truth about his own life, not to perform it, not to package it, but to actually steward it. He's walked through loss, burnout, chronic illness and grief, and come out the other side with something rare, wisdom that doesn't hide the cost. He's also the host of the Unshakeable Life podcast, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that podcast during our conversation. Jim, welcome to Bleeding Daylight.
Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Now, your life so far could probably be described as a little bit messy, but I have a sneaking suspicion that most of us could describe our lives that way to some degree. The difference is that many people are still trying to sweep their mess under the carpet. Do you think that hiding the difficult parts of life is a big part of the problem for many?
It is a problem because there's ego, there's this fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection. And when we get into these places where we're dealing with the fear, wherever it comes from, whether childhood trauma, maybe whatever happened to you that you never navigated or dealt with, we have these things and we project them because we want to have strength, right? We want to make sure that we appear to be strong. Because we're trying to appear to be strong, we're actually not as strong as we think we are. So yeah, I think it's very, very affected. Like I said, we tend to hide and try to project an appearance instead of actually healing and walking in something healthy.
What are some of the things that affected you through your life? I mean, even going way back as a child, there was various forms of trauma there, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was a lot. I'm actually technically diagnosed with complex PTSD and something called PDD, which is pervasive depression disorder, which is a big word for high-functioning depression. So growing up, I had a father who abandoned, he was abusive. My mom and I had a very tumultuous relationship together, which added to all of that. I went through a lot of bullying. When I mean a lot, I mean a lot. I almost took my life 3 times by the time I was 16. And I just had this thing after thing after thing that was going on in my life, not only happening to me, but around me, because when I was 12, my sister developed a brain tumor. And then later on, other things happening along these lines. But it felt growing up that there was just never a breath or a break between issues and challenges and things where I was able to actually grow up and to navigate emotions and all these things, because I was always under this high level of chronic stress. Nobody in my life helped me walk through any of that. I didn't know how to navigate feelings. I had to learn all of that on my own. So yeah, when we talk about trauma, that's just the childhood version of it. We haven't even gotten into the late teens and early adult. And one of the challenges is where you have one thing after another as opposed to one event. You handle life differently when life keeps hitting you versus you hit something and then there's something later on years down the road or weeks or months. No, when it's constantly hitting you, life looks different.
Did you start to believe that this was normal, because this is all that you had experienced as a child and a young adult, that there's these constant hits? Did it take you a while to realize, hey, not everyone is living this kind of life? There are some people that, while they might have their struggles, are living a very different kind of life to what I'm living.
I just thought that was just normal life. And then later on, I come to find out that what I considered normal was completely unhealthy. It really digressed from there, and it really was an eye-opener. And it was about the same time I had met Jesus. When I was a kid, I did go to like Catholic church or something because that's what's happened in Philadelphia. Then I became an atheist. Then I got into witchcraft. And it was about 25 I met Jesus, which was about the same time that I realized, oh, wait, this isn't healthy because there's healthier things going on. It was a night and day thing that really kind of rocked me.
When you did come to Jesus, as you say, at the age of around 25, did you believe, oh, this is going to be the end of all my issues? Was that the kind of faith that you had been sold by people around you? Or did you understand, even at that point, that there is going to continue to be struggles, but there's a different way to handle it going forward?
Yes, on both. So I did have a bunch of people around me that were trying to sell me the vacation style of faith. All your problems are great. You just need Jesus. I had those people around me, but I was wise enough to realize that's not how life works because I had already been through life. What people were trying to sell me on was like, hey, if you just accept Jesus, all of this will go away. And I knew that not to be the case because I had been living with the reality and consequences of all of that life happening. And that wasn't just going to go away. And I knew that. So even coming out of atheism and witchcraft, a lot of people will lead you through a prayer that says, hey, accept, believe, and confess. That wasn't my prayer to get saved. Quite frankly, in the Bible, there's no prayer you have to pray. It's believe in your heart, confess with your mouth. My prayer, quote unquote prayer to God was, I don't like you, but I can learn to love you. I realize I can't do this my way, so we'll try it your way. That was literally my conversation with God. The youth pastor that was with me, now I'm 26, this was the youth pastor of the church that I got saved in. He was like, well, let's go ahead and lead you through a proper prayer. And we prayed like whatever canned prayer that they have. And I don't fault that. Like if that's how you got saved, listen, coming to Jesus is coming to Jesus. But for me, it was a lot different in that, yeah, they went through the motions to make themselves feel better. Like I prayed the prayer that they wanted. But mine was a really heartfelt, like, my life is messed up and I can't do this. It's not working. So let's do it your way and let's see where that goes. Literally after my prayer and I got saved, I had an experience with God. And 6 months later, now get this, atheist and witchcraft, not full blown, but witchcraft and an atheist. Like I was a staunch atheist for like 15 years. Gave my life to Jesus. 6 months later, I'm sitting in Bible college. It's just crazy the way this stuff works out.
I'm wondering about that God that you didn't like at the time but could grow to love. Do you think that was because you had grown up with a wrong idea of who God was, that you hadn't fully found out who this God that offered everything for you, who he really was?
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Had I known who the real Jesus was, I think I would have had a different idea. Growing up in the Catholic faith, it was really just a bunch of rules. Do this, don't do this. If you do this, you're going to go to hell if you don't do this. And I don't do well under rules anyway. I've never have. But even so, there was no compassion. There was no love. There was no introduction to a very personal Jesus. Even the way the priests are, there was always this separation. And so whenever we were in trouble or whenever we were down or something, who do you turn to when you're taught you have to go through the priest in order to pray properly? You have to go to the priest to do these things. So even in the way that I was taught growing up is that God wasn't really personal and we had to go through a proxy. That really bothered me. And then I saw the hypocrisy in a lot of it. When my sister got her brain tumor, she was 12. So this was 1990. In 1988, I watched my grandfather choke to death. That was when instead of turning to God, which is what we should be doing, right? God is this open invitation to invite us in during our hardest times. And I'm going to fast forward to 2023 because of the way I handled it differently. In 88, when my grandfather died, I watched him choke to death. And I remember the time I said, God, you're dead to me. Again, it's that whole adage. How can a loving God do this to somebody? But I was never taught that God was personal. God was present. I was never taught that life happens. This is part of life. None of that was taught. Here I am as like 12 years old. I'm walking away from God. I basically became an atheist. I was smart enough. I was intelligent and they didn't match up. Boom, atheist. So I start fast forwarding that, right? So we go through all this trouble, all this trauma, all this stuff through my teen years. When I met my wife is who introduced me to Jesus. Fast forward to 2023, right? And this is I think the powerful difference in knowing that God is personal, God is present, and God is ever here with compassion and love. Yes, he chastises us. Yes, he calls out our sin. Yes, we get spanked sometimes, but the understanding that God is a true father, right? In 2023, I lost both my mother and my sister to cancer, 6 months apart. My wife lost her father the same week my mom died from an ulcer that exploded in his stomach. And then 2 months later, my wife tried to commit suicide. And again, this is the mental illness. It's not something that isn't part of the conversation with us. We've been married 26 years, but she actually had an attempt. To this day, the only reason she didn't succeed in her attempt was God, because the truck should have never missed her. Here I am in 2023. All of this is happening. Compared to 1988 when my grandfather died, God's not personal. I'm angry. He doesn't exist. God is dead to me. It was the Nietzsche, God is dead. Like, I completely, fully embrace that. He's no longer existent. 2023, when those things happened, I couldn't have lived through that year without God. The very present, personal presence of God, presence of Jesus Christ, I could not have made it through with not only just the amount of grief and the amount of loss, but the amount of weight that I'm carrying, because I'm now carrying the weight of my family's grief and the weight of my children's grief and all this other stuff, and having to process that, and still processing all the trauma I went through growing up. And instead of running from God, I ran to him. And I said, you know what? Whatever happens, happens, but I know you're with me. And it's really a stark difference when you understand the personhood and who Christ really is in his mission versus having an idea of him. And so when something goes wrong, you blame him easier.
I know that there are some people that we already mentioned would prefer to sweep the hard parts of life under the carpet and try and ignore that. But then there are others who live completely for those hard parts, and that's really their whole story. How do we get the balance right of not rejecting or not ignoring the tough parts of life, but at the same time, not making them our whole story?
The first thing I think it comes back to is, number one, is understanding the lies that we're believing. I just actually published a book on this. It's called Tell a Better Story. So the whole book premise is we have grown up in this trauma and this challenges, and we started believing lies, and that lies became our life. And we live it at such a lower potential simply because of the lies we believe, because these now become anchor points. And if you want to live to your higher potential, you've got to let go of these anchor points. You got to let go of some things and start applying truth. And so when we look at some of these people, like the middle people, there's people who don't want anything to do with it, but there are people who generally were like, I want something different, but I don't know how, because their whole identity became their trauma. And instead of saying, my identity is more than my trauma, my identity is more than my illness, my identity is more than whatever this thing I'm placing on myself, there's a resignation that says, I'm going to live here because this is all I ever known. And this is where it becomes challenging, because if you never want to push yourself out of everything you've always ever known, you'll never know what you're capable of. You'll never know what God can do in your life. We've got to make sure we have this balance where we say, okay, I want to be transparent, but I don't want to be translucent. And what I mean by that is I want to talk about my issues. I want to share the challenges. I want to share the struggles, but I don't want to be so translucent that you see everything there, because if I get so translucent, now I'm running into the problem of running into victimhood. Now I want sympathy. Now I want compassion. And although we should get some of those things, I shouldn't be fishing for some of these things. So if we live in a place of authentic transparency, we're saying, listen, I understand that I have these challenges. I said earlier, I'm diagnosed with complex PTSD. I am not my diagnosis. That is something I have to deal with. There's a reality in that. So we accept the reality of it, but we understand that I'm more than that. We push into something deeper. We push in to say, okay, if I didn't have this, how would Jim operate at his most healthiest? And a lot of times we see online where we're like, be the best version of yourself. I don't like that. And here's why, is because you don't even know the best version of yourself if you're the unhealthiest version of yourself. Where I start changing the conversation, which goes into what I'm saying, is be the healthiest version of yourself, because the healthiest will be the best version of yourself. And in doing that, it's learning to embrace the facts. Knowing the truth is different than the facts, because you may be hurt, you may be broken, you may be all of these things right now, but in God, you're not. And one day, if you keep pressing into Him, those facts become truth, and you start living out the truth, and you're no longer living in that facts of, I'm just this broken, decrepit, old, whatever I'm going through, blah, 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 blah. No, I am a son of God, I'm a daughter of God, and I'm living in the truth of God. Do I still struggle with these certain things? Absolutely. But I don't give in to them. Even Paul was through the Bible. He's like, I've been beaten. I've been this. I've been that. I've been that. But thanks be to Jesus Christ, I'm following after Him. There's something greater coming. And I think if we're going to come back to these middle ground people who want to embrace both, who wants to be able to say, okay, I want to live in this reality, but I'm also having to deal with this one. You're not as broken as you think you are. I think we get into this conversation of, I'm so broken, I can't do anything. I'm so broken, there's nothing that I'm going to accomplish. I'm so broken, who could love me? Absolutely not true. Your past does not define your present. It gives you opportunity for God to move. It gives opportunity for healing, and it gives opportunity for God to show you that your future self is going to rock your past self, and your past does not disqualify you from your future. And so when we look at this, we want to dive into this thing where we say, all right, God, here's all of me. Let me put this before you. But I also accept what you're trying to give me in the grace and the mercy of it, because I know there's healing, and I know I can share the story without becoming the story.
You spent years in various forms of ministering to others and trying to help them along the path. But when was it for you that you realized that you needed to tell a better story about yourself?
It was 2017. We had just stepped down from church ministry. I was church pastor, church planner. God was like, all right, Jim, you need to give the church away. You need to step down. I'm taking you out of ministry, because if you don't go, your wife isn't going to make it. And our first ministry is to our spouses. I handed the church off. I was like, listen, this is what I feel. This is what's going. In a month, my house was sold, and my wife ended up in the hospital for 6 months. While she was in and out of the hospital for those 6 months, laying on the couch, unable to do that, we were on suicide watch and all these things, I started noticing trends in my own self, my own thinking, my own patterns. And I was like, wow, that's kind of a challenge right there. And I started diving deeper and asking hard questions, like questions I had been refusing to ask for 30 years. I was finally starting to ask, where did this come from? Why do I see myself as not good enough? Why do I feel like I have no talent? Why do I feel like all of this stuff when the truth of God says differently? My resume says differently, but my thoughts are saying that that's never good enough. That's never there. And so in 2017, I started writing a lot of stuff to keep my own mind from going crazy during that time. I ended up writing the book. The funny part was the book stayed on the shelf, basically, or in the computer for almost 10 years. Simply because I was still navigating, I was still struggling, I was still working through it and those things. Fast forward to 2026, I updated everything and I released it because I'm in a different space. I've been through therapy, I've been through prayer, I've been through healing. I'm constantly doing this stuff. But it was in 2017, the light bulb started going on and I was like, okay, Jim, there's a challenge you're facing. And the Holy Spirit was there the whole time. Red flag, red flag. Like if God could hold a flag in front of you, he's like, hey, pay attention to this one because this is the one you need to focus on. And I would just start journaling them. Okay, I got this link to this link to this. And I just started kind of mapping out my thoughts and realizing most of these came from childhood. The book was written as a way for me to heal from those things.
You'd be the last person to say that you're now the complete package, that everything is going absolutely amazing, but you're still on a journey, as we all are. But when did you decide to start helping other people to find their story and to tell a better story about themselves? When did you decide to turn what you had learned into something that other people could use in their journey?
This is a very interesting question. And the reason it's an interesting question is because for a long time, most of my life has been about helping others, period. Whether to help them overcome negativity, personality, whatever. But in an unhealed state, in an unhealthy state, I did that because I thought there was a part of me, the negative part of me, that if I could help them be better, then ultimately I would be better. And this happened for a long time because it was me chasing me feeling okay about me. Whoever I could help, I helped. Whoever needed help, they got help. Whatever it was, I gave it to them. All the way up to being a pastor. And I will tell you, more often than not, a lot of pastors are codependent for this very reason. It was somewhere around, I think I would say between 2020 and 2022 before my mom got sick, where as I was starting to heal, as I was starting to think, I was like, I no longer needed the approval of people. I no longer needed you to be okay for me to be okay. And I think that was the really big shift for me because prior to that, I needed you to be okay or I couldn't be okay. After some healing, after some prayer, after some things, my mindset started to really shift and my heart followed with, okay, I am okay regardless if you're okay, but I'm going to do everything I can to help you be okay. If you can get that, you're going to walk in a whole lot of freedom. The book really kind of started resurfacing because this is a way to serve people that says, hey, listen, if you don't hire me to be your personal coach, here's a book that goes through the whole process. You can get that, read it, and then you can go off and take it to your therapist and work through it, pray through it. I decided to say, hey, let's make resources that would help people as opposed to me being present all the time because I'm only one person. My letting go and saying, I don't need to be present. I don't need that. My ego's okay right now. My heart's okay. I'm not people pleasing. I oftentimes joke on my podcast and I say, I'm a recovering people pleaser because I know how far I've come, but I've got a little ways to go. So I'm in recovery from that. Because of that, my whole heart is now serving people for the fact of serving people, not serving people to make sure I'm okay.
You mentioned there another one of the resources that you have for people, and that is the Unshakeable Life podcast. Tell me a little about that.
Yeah, so my Unshakeable Life podcast has been around probably a few years now. It's really where I get people on and we have dynamic conversations around, faith-filled things in order to basically say, okay, what are some challenges? How can we get over that? How did you handle all that? That's an interview show. In about a month, I'm actually launching a solo show too called Faith, Focus, and Follow Through, which is going to be more my conversations one-on-one with me to you to be able to digress and pull down and go deeper into the story where the Unshakable Life is. Let me ask you about your story and how you handled that. The Faith, Focus, and Follow Through is more, let's dig deep into my perspective on it. So both of them are going to be compendium for one another. But ultimately, it just really comes back to challenges that you faced. What are some principles you've used? What does it look like now?
You must have spoken to some interesting people that have had their own challenges. What's a common thread that you're seeing with the guests that you've spoken to on the Unshakeable Life podcast?
There's three probably real big common things. And I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, some of them that are very famous versus people you probably never heard of. And there's three things that have been really common among all of them. Number one, every one of them faced burnout because they bought into hustle culture and they try to outwork their trauma. Every single one of them almost that we've dug into that conversation have said that at some point, saying, I was almost burnt out. I did this, I did this, I did this. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter if they had 1 million followers or 5. The same thing happened. I gave into hustle culture and I burnt myself out. Number two, I would definitely say there is the insecurity and the inferiority challenges where people who keep saying, I'm not good enough. I don't feel like I'll ever accomplish what I want to accomplish. I feel empty because I may have external success, but I don't have internal because they're dealing with that insecurity of not being enough or not feeling enough. I would think the third one really comes back to this fear of, a lot of them fear personal rejection. Many of them are like, hey, you want to reject me online? Fine, we just understand that. But a lot of them actually have this internal fear of personal rejection where they are struggling with people who really hurt them growing up that they didn't heal from, that they're carrying, and these expectations. There's a lot of that within a lot of our conversations as well.
If you were speaking to someone at the moment who is going through their own doubts, their own struggles, we know that it's human nature to think, yes, that's going to be helpful for others, but I'm pretty much a lost cause, that we can feel that we're not the one that's going to come through with a breakthrough. What would you say to that person who is still feeling that way, who is not convinced that they're going to find a way forward?
The first thing I would say, there are no lost causes. If there were lost causes, then Jesus wouldn't have needed to go to the cross. And because Jesus went to the cross, there are no lost causes. Period. Doesn't matter how far you think you've gone, doesn't matter what you've been through, there are no lost causes. And when you feel like you're a lost cause, your feelings may be valid, but your feelings are lying to you. Simply because you have value, you have beauty, you have a lot of things inside of you that God has put there. And sometimes those things get hidden by mountains of hurt, mountains of pain, constant going through chaos, constant struggle, and you try to find your way through it, but it feels like you're grasping at straws and there's dark. And then you get into the outside world and all these different Christian denominations are telling you 5 different things. Just show up to church, just do this, just do this. No. If you're listening right now and you want to hear anything that was probably the most impactful thing in my life, is to basically shut out as much noise as you can and get at the feet of Jesus. Mary did the best thing in the world. Martha wasn't doing anything inherently wrong. She was working, she was doing a thing, she was doing custom. But Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, and most people don't realize is when Jesus came back for Lazarus, right? And they're all like, if you had been here, and Jesus talked to both Mary and Martha actually was like, yeah, if you'd been here. And Jesus was like, well, you don't realize. And she's like, yeah, I realize. She had this explanation and she just didn't get the picture. And he spoke to Mary, and Mary was like, I know you're the resurrection. I know you can do this. Like, she got it. She got something that Martha didn't have. And in the moment of her greatest crisis, she saw Christ show up for who he was, not what he could do. So if you're feeling like a lost cause, if you're feeling like there's no hope, just sit before Jesus. Don't worry about all the noise. Don't worry about all the hype or all the denominational this or do this or this. Just sit down with Jesus. Pull out your word, pull out a journal, whatever you need to do. And just sit and listen and pray and cry and snot and give everything in your heart out there and just be like, you know what? Here's the reality and the rawness of it. And just sit. Because I'm going to promise you, those moments in the presence of God will do more for you than any church service, any serving, anything else in this world, because you're actually doing the thing that we're all called to do, and that's to get to know Jesus better. And it's in those moments, those places where you will see hope again. Now, is it going to be easy on the other side of that? Absolutely not, because you still have to go through the dirt to get to the diamond. But you're actually going to be reconnected to understand you're not doing it alone.
Jim, we've only really scratched the surface of your life story and the way that you're now helping people to tell a better story. But there is a link in the show notes at bleedingdaylight.net that people can find your podcast, find your website, find your book so that they can discover more and, of course, be alerted to when the new podcast is launched. I want to thank you for what you've shared today, and thank you very much for spending time with us today on Bleeding Daylight.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed getting to know you a little better and being here for your audience.
Thank you for listening to Bleeding Daylight. Please help us to shine more light into the darkness by sharing this episode with others. For further details and more episodes, please visit bleedingdaylight.net.